Hello everyone and welcome back to another Black Clover mobile video. So today we are jumping right into the tier list. I actually didn't want to make a tier list this early, but I needed to at least show you guys what characters you should build or what characters you should avoid. And just a disclaimer, this tier list is still work in progress. The game just came out. I actually didn't want to make one, but here we are, so let's start. First with the SS tier, and let's actually start with the two Yamis. So there is the red Yami and the seasonal blue Yami. So let's start first with the actual blue Yami. So let's bring him up right here. So the blue Yami. So as you can the red Yami. So as you can see right here, he is very good. And he do a lot of cool stuff, and he's actually changed from the closed beta. I didn't like him a lot in the closed beta. He was gear intensive, but they did actually buff him, and they did buff his stats like crit rate that he needs. And yeah, so let's start with his first skill. So his first skill is very good actually, and it's an AoE. So he is very good farmer. You put him on any team, disable his skills, and his just basic skill will just AoE the entire team. It's very cool. And if the enemies if you land a successful crit rate, you will apply bleed to all the enemies, and we will see that bleed is actually important for his kit. So let's go with his skill number 2, the one that goes into cooldown. As you can see right here, it do have some good multipliers, and it can stun the enemies if they have bleed debuff. It's guaranteed stun, and that's crazy. So that's why I said bleed for this guy is very important, and he actually can gain attack. And he actually do have a gain a 30% increased damage upon attacking a boss. So this very good for the PvE content. His ultimate is also a single target with very high multipliers, and he applies to himself an increased crit rate for 2 turns. So as you can see here, it's an 18% crit rate, and he has a 60% chance of applying bleed to an enemy. That's very awesome. He can actually stun also on his ult, I think, right? I think if the enemy is if the enemies have the bleed debuff, I think he can also crit. His combined attack is very good. If he is having a buff, and most combined attack will give your attacker a buff. So if you put him next to a support character, he will actually have a buff when you do the combined attack. So this is very easy to complete. He will attack with 15 more increased damage. So this is a very good buff. I think this is the best buff you can have to do more damage. He do have a united attack with Jack, and Jack is very important for him. I mean, not important, but he is very good for him, for Yami to have on the team. Excuse me. He helps him a lot with the bleed, so he can activate his extra stuns and extra buffs. And also his passives is increases the damage done and increases the crit damage. So as you can see, Yami is actually a very good damage dealer, and I feel like he will stay good for some time. But let's go second of all to the blue Yami. So I feel actually, so right now I feel like the red Yami is actually better than the blue Yami, but I feel like in the long run the blue Yami is actually will age better, and I will tell you why. So let's start with his first skill. It's a single target with very good multipliers, and he slashes the enemy 2 times, and if he have more or 4 skill points, he will increases his attack by 30%, the magical and the physical attack. So it's a very good skill number 1, it's nothing to like be amazed. So let's go with his actually skill number 2. It's actually an AoE that deals damage to all enemies and applied block HP recovery. So this is actually very very good. I won't say very broken because the meta is still changing. We don't know if the healers will be prevalent in arena or no, if the enemies will be, or if we will have like some enemies that will heal or some bosses that will heal. So it's actually a very good buff, but it can be broken in the future. And he also applies increases special points, so he gives himself more special points. So as you can see, he's all about as the red Yami, he's all about bleed. This guy is all about increasing the special points. So let's go for his ultimate, and his ultimate is the best thing about him. So let's talk about his ultimate. It's a single target damage, it's a very good multipliers, but the broken thing is in this ultimate it applies total silence for 2 turns, and it applies reduced special points ×3 to an enemy. So total silence is actually devastating for the enemies for PvE and for PvP or for arena. So when you are hit with total silence, your characters cannot use their ultimate or use their skill number 2. They can only use their basic skill, and for 2 turns that's a long time. So if the enemy don't have a cleanser or the immunity character on their team, I mean, yeah, they will be just like sitting there watching you while you are cooking them. His combined attack is actually very awesome. It removes a barrier from a single target, and his passives just applies more damage and applies 15% increased favor damage to yourself. So if he's attacking, I think so he is blue, so if he is attacking, I think, a red character, he will do even more damage. So for now, for the Yamis, I feel like the red one is better, but in the long run, I think the blue one will age up better because of all the stuff he can do. But nonetheless, the 2 Yamis are very good. I mean, you can't go wrong with building either of them. So let's talk about the seasonal Asta. So the seasonal Asta is very interesting character. He is actually very fast. He do have a very high speed stats. He is like, I think, the fastest of the. He is even faster than the Yamis. So and you will see in his kit why he needs to be fast. So let's talk about the skill number 1. It's a single target damage, and by the way, this guy is a single target damage beast. So his skill number 1, he just do damage to a single target, and if you have a buff active, he has a 50% chance to deal an additional attack that inflicts 70% of attacks. So you need to have a buff on him, because this skill number 1, it will do crazy damage if you have a buff on him, and it will actually increases with time. You won't see this increased damage often, but you can see it sometimes if the fights drags on, and they do drag on sometimes. So his skill number 2 is also a single target damage. He attacks after applying increased attack to himself. So he applies a buff, then he attacks. The buff is by 42%, and he has an 80% chance to apply 20% increased stamina to himself. So very basic, straightforward, just do damage. His ultimate is very unique. So as you can see, it do have some good multipliers, and if you attack an enemy whose HP is or at 80% or above, he can actually get an extra turn. So that's why he is fast, and you need to build him fast. So if he is like the first character you attack with, or the second, and you attack an enemy with full HP, he will actually be able to have an extra turn, and you can maybe smack them again with the skill number 2 or the skill number 1. So like at the start, he will be like a crazy damage dealer. And by the way, This Asta is a PvE monster, and he also can work in arena, and he works in arena very good, but I feel like he is a PvE monster. But the thing I'm scared of with this Asta, as you can see, all of his kit is just damage, and if the game releases more damaging character than this guy, and if the power creep like starts fast, I feel like he will just maybe will not be good in the future, but who knows, maybe the game will not bring a power creep fast. So yeah, I mean, he is just a damage dealer. All the damage dealers get power crept in the end, but I feel like he will be the fastest one to get power crept, but I might be wrong, so we will see. His passives also just focus on damage. So now let's go and talk about Mars and Lotus. So these two characters are actually annoying beyond belief. So let's start with Mars and let's go next to Lotus. So Mars was actually very broken in the closed beta. They nerfed him a little bit, but he is still a beast nonetheless. So his his skill number 1 is a single target damage dealing ability. He has a 60% chance to taunt the enemy. This is very good to have on a skill number 1. Just a 60% chance to make the enemy just attack you and not your team. That's very awesome. And by the way, this Mars is tanky. He is a tank. I think he is the best tank in the game. So the taunt on him is very good. His skill number 2 is also a single target, and it do have a 40% chance of applying stun, and I think it goes up to 60%. So a 60% chance to stun the enemy is actually crazy. You just delay their turn, and it do have some very good multipliers, as you can see right here. And he also applies defense reduction level 3 to the enemies if they are stunned. So he is an annoying character. So his ultimate is an AoE and applies Fortify to himself for 2 turns. So Fortify is, as you can see, reduced damage taken by 34%. It's a damage reduction. That's why he is very tanky. And he has a 25 chance of applying extended debuff duration. This is just like an extra spice on his ultimate. So if the enemies have like maybe stuns on them, you can actually maybe extend the stuns for another turn, and that's very annoying. This guy is crazy for arena. So his combined attack is an AoE and has a 40% chance of applying the stun to the enemy. So it's a 40% chance AoE stun. That's crazy. This guy, I love him. He's toxic. His united attack is with Lotus, and he applies reduce all attack to the enemies for 2 turns if their stamina is 50% or less, and has 40% chance to taunt the enemies for 1 turn, and it's also an AoE taunt. His passives is all about I think tanking. So his passive number 1 is reduced damage taken while being attacked, and the other one is applies debuff block so to allies. So that's actually very good. Yeah, I like Mars, he's very good. So let's go next to Lotus. Lotus is actually a very interesting character, and he is actually he got actually nerfed in the final release. He was even more busted in the closed beta. So let's start with his skill number 1. His skill number 1 is just an AoE, not the highest multipliers. It do a little bit of damage, but it do have it has a 50% chance of applying 15% decreased stamina. His skill number 2 is a single target damage, not also the highest of multipliers, but it applies a extended debuff duration and applies reduced damage resistance. So as you can see, it's a guaranteed extended debuff duration, so he works very good with Mars. Mars land a stun, and then Lotus just press skill number 2 and they are now stunned for 2 turns. For 2 turns your character can do nothing, just watches. That's very crazy, very good combo. His ultimate though, his ultimate is actually an AoE and it applies Incapacitate. this is better than the damage or the defense reduction. This is increases damage taken by 50% straight up, like all damage, not defense. So this is the better debuff, and it applies to all enemies for 2 turns. That's crazy. He has a 50% chance to remove all buffs from an enemy, so he also have a remove buffs, and he has also a 50% chance to apply speed reduction to an enemy by 55%. This guy ultimate is cracked. So if you actually can land all these debuffs, like you are winning. Like I don't see how you can't win. So yeah, he's very good. His united attack with Mars is the same. It applies speed reduction to the enemies, and his passives he have a 25% chance to apply 10% all attack reduction, so this is not guaranteed. And his other one applies 12% attack, but to be honest, you are not playing this guy for attacks. I mean, he do a lot on his kit. Like Lotus is, I feel like a character who won't be gone real soon. Like he is not focused on damage. I don't think he will be power capped anytime soon, unless we get like the next characters are like top tier cleansers. I mean, what you can do. So let's go next for Mimosa and William. So Mimosa and William are actually interesting. William actually got buffed. Mimosa actually got a slightly nerfed from the closed beta. So let's start with William. So William, his skill number 1 is a single target damage and has 40% chance to transform the enemies into tree. It's basically a stun, a 40% chance to stun the enemy. On skill number 1, that's crazy. That's very good. His skill number 2 is a buff for all for I think 1 ally, and it applies. I mean, look at these buffs. Increases the attack by 84%, increases the speed by 65%, and increases the stamina by fixed amount if your ally have stamina at 50% or lower. So I mean, listen, you can buff your DPS with this one and they go crazy. But I think the most cracked thing about William actually is his ultimate. So let's just read this. So it's an AoE, applies Fortify level 3 to all allies, so reduces damage taken by 34% to all allies, applies counter attack to the ally with the highest attack for 1 turn. This line here is crazy. So for example, if you have him with maybe a basic skill character within AoE, for maybe like Red Yami right here, and you put the counter on him, I mean, listen, the enemy team will get like shooked. I mean, he is very good, very good. He applies a counter attack to buff to the allies. Very awesome. I feel like the difference between William and Mimosa, William is like a better arena character, but I feel like Mimosa is actually a better PvE character for the highest content so far, because our characters are still low. But we will talk about Mimosa after we talk about William's passives. He have a 30% chance of applying 10% increased stamina to himself after being attacked, and he applies 5% Fortify to all allies upon using the special skill. Yeah, very solid passives. Now let's talk about the Mimosa, and we will be done with the SS tier. So Mimosa, her a single target, it's her skill number 1 is a single target that won't do a lot of damage, but it will heal your lowest HP ally member, so just a free heal. And she has a 45% chance to apply increased special point to an ally who has HP, whose HP has been recovered, so you can also increase their special points. Very awesome healing and supportive skill number 1. I mean, look, it's just skill number 1, but it do have some awesome effects. Let's talk about her skill number 2. It's an AoE that grants all allies HP recovery equal to her attack, and applies an extended buff duration for 1 turn. So I mean, if you have like the William OP buff of countering, you can like extend that. If you have some other buffs, I mean, she is awesome. I love her. And also increases damage resistance to all allies, and these are all guaranteed. And she do a lot. Mimosa do a lot. Let's talk about her special skill or her ultimate. Grants all allies HP recovery equal to 180% of her magical attack, so a better heal. Applies increased defense to all allies. It increases defense by 140%. But the most busted thing in her ultimate is resurrect a designated ally with 30% HP. So she actually can revive a character, one of your characters, and that can be very annoying in arena and can be very useful in PvE. Like in the later stages, in the harder stages, enemies will be one-shotting you. Mimosa can prevent that and maybe even grant you the win. Her passives applies 5% reduced damage taken and resurrects an ally with 50% HP by using the special skill. Very, very awesome character. I love her so much. Yeah, I mean, so the difference between them, I think Vengeance is more of an arena character. I feel like Mimosa is more of a PvE character. But I feel like Mimosa can actually fall off if the content can get easier. We don't know, just a speculation. And with this we are done with the SS tier. I need to go faster right now. So let's start with the S tier, and let's start with the first character is Jack. Jack is also a very good character that he got actually buffed from the closed beta. He got reworked. So let's talk about Jack. His skill number 1, 60% chance to apply a bleed on the enemies. It's a single target damage ability, very basic, but it do the work. Very good to use with the red Yami. His skill number 2 is the one that got changed. It's very cracked actually. He applies increased pan level 4 for 2 turns, he increased crit rate level 4 for himself, and has 60% chance to apply increased speed level 1. So he increased penetration by 75%. He increases the crit rate by 26%, and he increases speed by 35%. And you will see why this guy gets a lot of buffs. So if we go to his ultimate, the Death Scythe, as you can see here, has an 80% chance of applying bleed to an enemy, so it's a very high chance, and attack with 10% increased crit damage for each buff you have. So the more buffs you have on Jack, the more damage his ultimate will do, and it will actually do add up. It's increased crit damage. So I feel like he is a gear focused character, so if you don't have enough crit rate, if he doesn't crit, this will be useless. But if you have a lot of crit rate and if he has a lot of buffs on him and he crits, he will do some crazy damage. That's why I put him lower than the red Yami. So he can do damage, but I mean, yeah, his united attack is with Yami, and his passives is increases the damage done, and he applies Sever to yourself for 1 turn upon using skill number 2. Sever is increased damage done proportionate to your remaining HP. So yeah, I mean, what do you want me to say? He is a very, very solid character, not a bad character at all. Let's go next to the S tier character is Fugolion. So Fugolion is a very good character, and that's because this guy exists. So these guys help each other very, very nicely. So Fugolion skill number 1, if the target is suffering from a DOT effect or damage over time effect, applies 30% increased damage to self. So his skill number 1, as you can see, the multipliers are very, very high, and if you have like an enemy with a burn effect, for example, he will do even more damage. Very, very good skill number 1 that can like sometimes even one-shot enemies. His skill number 2 is an AoE that has a 50% chance of applying burn to an enemy, dealing continuous damage. So as you can see the combo, you just burn the enemies and try to finish them off with one. His ultimate is a single target with a very high multipliers also. Attacks after applying 40% increased damage to yourself if the enemy is taken DOT damage. This line is very important for his damage, so that's why I told you he works very good with Leopold, because Leopold also applies burns or applies DOT effects on the enemies. So you run Fugolion with a debuffer on your team and he will be cracked. I mean, 40% increased damage is a lot of damage, but you need the DOT, or you just use his skill number 2, then go to the ultimates. And he also applies burn to an enemy. It's a guaranteed burn. I mean, he's a very good character. His united attack is with Nozel, and he applies burn to the enemy. It's an AoE, by the way. He applies burn to the enemy upon landing a successful crit rate. A crit attack, and applies defense reduction to the enemy, and this is all AoE. So yeah, I mean, with Nozel they make a great team. His passives, 5% damage increase, and it's increased more with when attacking burned enemies. And his other passive, this one is very good. Upon using skill number 2, applies one burn debuff to an enemy. So the debuffs from the passives are better than the debuffs from the skills. So yeah, I mean, this is very helpful for him and for his brother Leopold. So let's go to the next character, Rail. He was for me the best character in the closed beta. He was very busted. He got reworked. I mean, he is still annoying, but not at the same level as he was. So let's start talking about his skill number 1. It's a single target damage. If you have more or if you have 4 or more special points, it applies increased magical damage. This is like the Yami effect. His skill number 2 is an AoE, so this is the new skill he gets access to. It's an AoE that applies defense reduction to all enemies. That's very awesome. It's guaranteed and has 50% chance to dispel buff from an enemy, and he also have an AoE strip. That's very crazy. If you land this will be very huge in the arena. His ultimate is an AoE attack that applies Incapacitate level 3 to all enemies. So this is the better buff. I think this buff is better than defense reduction. Increases damage taken by 50% and has 40% chance to apply stun. It's an AoE stun. Even though it's a low chance, not the highest, only 40% chance to apply stun. But if it actually lands, this ultimate alone can actually win you the game. Like maybe you can stun 2 or 3 enemies and like it's GG, what can you do? So his combined attack has 80% chance to apply buff block for 1 enemy, very awesome. And his passives is increased damage done when attacking a defender. I mean, not the greatest. And his passive, the other passive, is upon using skill number 2, applies debuff extension from one turn to the enemy. It's very good passive. This one is very good. So yeah, this is real. Can win you the game, can like do okay. It's one of the others. So let's go next to Radius right here. Radius was an SR character in the closed beta, and he got a SSR he got an SSR promotion in the final game. It's actually very good. So let's start with his skill number 1. It's a single target damage dealing ability. Has 40% chance to apply poison to an enemy. Basic, it do the damage, it debuffs the enemy. His skill number 2 is an AoE that applies increases defense to all allies. So you do more damage, you make your team tankier. Not the best, not the worst. It's a good ability. His ultimate Carl. So he grants all allies a barrier equal to 140% of his magical attack, has a 50% chance to apply increased endurance to an ally, and grants debuff immunity. This line right here is actually crazy. He grants allies debuff immunity. So this guy readies with Jack, like you can stack a lot of buffs on Jack, and his ultimate will hit like a truck. It can like literally one shot anything. So I like Radis. He do have a lot of things baked into his kit. His passives is the passive number 1 is upon being attacked has 30% chance to apply taunt. Just by standing there, if the enemy uses maybe an AoE skill and he hits Radius, he can have a chance to taunt that enemy. And his unique passive is straight up 7 speed, very good passive. So let's go to the next character, Sally. So Sally is I think she was nerfed. I don't remember if she was nerfed, but she's still very good. So her skill number 1 is applies 90% lifesteal. So as you can see, 90% is a lot of lifesteal. So her skill number 2, she gives a buff to an ally and applies increased magical attack, increased crit rate, and has 60% chance to extend buff durations. So for your DPS, for example, let's go again and talk about Jack. You target Jack with this skill number 2, and Jack will be popping, doing a lot of damage. Her skill number 2 is very good. So her ultimate, Sticky Salamander, applies increased attack to all allies for 2 turns and applies increased crit damage to all allies with the same attribute. So she can be. This line makes her a situational character. I mean, with the same attribute, so she is a red character. So she is very helpful for Yami, for example. But even with this line, like not active, I mean, she still is a solid character. Her combined attack increases the magical attack by level 5 of your partner. It's by 100%, very good, and has a 50% chance of applying increased stamina. Her passives grants HP recovery equal to 10% of maximum HP at the start of a wave, very good. Increases, and the other passive increases the gives the increased all attack level of special skill by 1. So special skill, it will be increased all attack by 4. So she will give you even more damage. I think it will be 75%. Sally, very solid support character. So, and with that, we finish with the S tier characters, and let's jump right into the A characters. Let's start with, where is he? Nozel, because I talked about him first. So, and let's bring Leopold, and let's pull Charlotte. So let's start with Nozel. So Nozel fires a silver bullet at the enemy. It's a single target. Skill number 1 has 60% chance to apply poison. Very good skill, and he is a debuffer, by the way. So he do have a lot of debuffs on the enemies. He can put a lot of debuffs on the enemies. His skill number 2 is an AoE that applies magical attack reduction to all enemies, so he debuffs their attack. His ultimate is applies weapon disarm to level 3 to all enemies for 2 turns. I don't remember what weapon disarm is actually, this is not written here, but I remember it being a very good effect. So as you can see, he just makes the enemy team do less damage. That's Nozel. He makes the enemy team do very less damage. His combined attack is a single target that applies reduced special point -2 to an enemy, and his united attack is with Fugulion. His passives applies 2.5 increased damage done if there is at least one opponent with debuff, and he can do that easily. and applies 12% fortify to yourself if you have 3 or more SP. So he will not be doing the most damage, but he will be very good in arena, I feel like, better than PvE. So let's go to Leopold. So Leopold, I was actually thinking about putting him in S tier. I mean, it don't matter right now because this tier list is still work in progress. I mean, I think you can put him to S tier because Fugolion exists. I mean, but yeah, I will just put him in A tier for now. Let's talk about what Leopold can do. His skill number 1 is single target damage that applies 50% lifesteal. He can heal a lot with his skill number 1. He do have a very good sustain. So his skill number 2 attacks after applying increased magical attack proportionate to your HP. So I think this is the more higher HP, the more damage you will be doing, and has a 50% chance of applying burn to the enemy. It's very good skill. His ultimate is, I think, his biggest point or his biggest appeal. So it's a single target damage, attacks after applying 50% increased damage to yourself if an enemy is taking continuous damage from burn. So if we go back and see Fugolion's ult, as you can see right here, Fugolion ultimate is increases 40% damage if an enemy is taking DOT damage. So this could be like bleed or burn, it doesn't matter, just a debuff or debuff that do damage. But Leopold is actually needs to be a burn, but it's more of a buff than Fugolion. And the other thing is applies 30% lifesteal to yourself before attacking, so he can actually recover a lot of his HP, and that's why he is very good with Fugolion. Fugolion can burn the enemy, enemies very very easily. I'm sorry, and Leopold can do a lot of damage with his ultimate and lifesteal like crazy. His combined attack, if an enemy is affected with a debuff, attacks after applying 30% increased damage to yourself. Very basic, it do the job, it gives you a very good damage. His passives increases the damage done and applies 2% increased damage done to yourself upon attacking each enemy with a burn debuff. So as you can see, this guy Kit relies on the burn debuff. So if we ever get like another character that do a lot of burn debuffs on the enemies, he can actually go even to maybe S tier. We don't know the future and we need to wait and see. And lastly, let's talk about the last character, and that's Charlotte. So Charlotte actually, I think she got changed. So let's go through her kit. So her skill number 1 attacks after applying 30% increased damage to yourself if the enemy has mark, and this mark debuff or buff is very important to her kit. Her skill number 2, it's an AoE that applies reduced defense level to all enemies and has a 50% chance to apply mark to the enemies for 2 turns. So what is this mark debuff? This debuff is actually very how do I say it, very cracked. The mark grants an additional turn if an enemy with a mark is defeated. So this can be very helpful or it can be very useless. So if you're maybe like Charlotte, like geared like crazy, she do a lot of damage. So if she defeats an enemy with the mark, she gets an extra turn. I mean, extra turn is crazy in this game. Extra turns are crazy in base turn games, and that's very awesome. But if your team is like not that built, or your Charlotte is like not very good, she is a debuffer, she's not a damage dealer. I mean this can work, but I don't know. It's and the thing is, if this was 100% chance to apply a mark, I mean, she would be very good. I don't think she would be crazy, because you need to apply the mark and then you need to defeat the enemy with mark. So it takes a lot of work, but if you do actually kill the enemy with mark, I mean, you actually just win. Your characters gets a extra turn. Let's talk about her ultimate. It's an AoE, very low multipliers. She applies attack reduction to all enemies and has 40% chance of applying bleed to an enemy, dealing continuous damage. I mean, as you can see, her ultimate is not doing anything special. I feel power creep will hit Charlotte very early actually. Her combined attack applies Incapacitate level 5, that's very good, but it's a single target. If this was an AoE, it would have been better. Her united attack is with Soul. It attacks the enemy, it's a single target damage, attacks after applying 30% increased damage to yourself if the enemy has mark. I mean, I don't know how to feel about her. Her passives applies 2% increased damage if there is at least one opponent with mark, and her unique applies 20% defense reduction to an enemy with mark for 2 turns. I don't know how to feel about her actually. I don't like her that much. I mean, I could be wrong, she could be very good, maybe an S tier character, or maybe in the future we will get characters that help her with her mark debuff. Maybe she will be very OP in the future, but for now I would not build her if I pull her. So this is it for today's video. This is just a work in progress tier list. This is just the SSR one. I will actually do another one, but not so soon, about the SRs. And yeah, I mean, if you disagree with something, please tell me in the comments. Tell me why do you disagree, why do you think my list is wrong, or maybe why do you think it's right. So let's try to have a discussion in the comments. And this is it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, and I will catch you in the next one.